Welcome to You Can Talk to Me, a Beatles podcast. It's time to make our way across the universe and talk all things John, Paul, George and Ringo.
Welcome along and thanks for tuning in. Michael Croker with you, this week for a fun chat with Brig Corban. Now, Bridge on November 1, 2023, had a once-in-a-lifetime moment with Paul McCartney during his Suncorp Stadium performance in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. This was really something to witness, as I, by chance, just happened to be standing next to her. 3 rows back, we were front and centre from the stage. What a night this was. Bridge is a young Beatles fan that had to make some big decisions to put herself in a situation to see Macca live. And what happened on that night from the audience in her moment with him was more than she could have ever imagined. Bridge, thanks for joining us here on the You Can Talk to Me podcast. It's great to finally sit with you here.
Great to be here.
Wednesday, November 1st, 2023 was one of the great nights of my life. We saw Paul at the Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane, and we just happened to be next to each other, I think about 3 rows back, right in the middle. And I remember when you walked toward me, and I was so happy that I could see that there was a hardcore fan that I was going to be next to, because I'm obviously hardcore as well, and I could see from your excitement and the sign that you were holding that you were there with a mission. We are going to talk about what happened that night with you and that interaction with Paul. Before we get into that part of it, can you just take us back in time? When did your fandom begin and how did it start?
I think it must have been maybe like 2001. I would have been about 10 years old. And Dad still has his record player, and he had a couple of the 45s, and one of them was the Let It Be one, and the B side was You Know My Name, Look Up the Number. And Dad and I have got a bit of a quirky sense of humour / I don't know, interest. And I do remember him playing that one night, and I loved it. He didn't like the other side, so he didn't really listen to that side, but I remember him playing You Know My Name, and we were dancing around the lounge to it. And I think that kind of sparked something, and something in the back of my mind is saying something about George Harrison. He died that year, and I think all that combined kind of made me realise, oh, there's this band, or was this band out there called the Beatles. Who are these people? And from there, I can't even remember how the rest of it started, but I'd go somewhere, and so I'm like a little magnet. I'll go somewhere, and I know there's a reason I'm going into like a bookstore, and there's a Beatles book, or I know there's a reason I'm looking in a particular magazine. There's an article, and I'd rip it out of the magazines at the dentist, and I'd make folders. So I do blame my dad. Really.
That's such a specific song, and it's so unique to their entire catalogue. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that You Know My Name, Look Up the Number was the gateway into Beatle fandom.
I think it's just a silly song, and Dad listens to a lot of old music, but he loves things like the Goons, or I don't know, things like that. He's really big on the Goons and silly quirky humour like that. And so it was just a fond memory of Dad playing it. It was just a bit of a catchy song. It is a bit of a random one, but it's kind of catchy. I was playing it this afternoon. I thought, that's really weird. Why did I listen to that one?
That's terrific. So as a young person, I was second generation fan. I started listening around the age of 8, 9, and that was in the late 70s. And even then, it wasn't really cool to be a Beatles fan when you were going to school. And I remember there was one day at the school, we were putting up posters of our favourite bands, and kids are putting up posters of Kiss and all this kind of business. And I come in with this Beatles poster and took a lot of stick. I'm just wondering, what was it like for you with that kind of fandom? Did you find your tribe?
I think I grew up in a very Christian home and went to church every Sunday, and the school I went to was Christian. And when I first discovered them, I had there were 4 of us, and I don't know if they really knew who the Beatles were, like what I was getting into, and we pretended that we were the Beatles. So I was George Harrison, and my other friend wanted to be George Harrison, and we had one John Lennon and one Paul McCartney, but no Ringo, sad to say. But they soon sort of grew out of it within a few months, and my obsession kept going. So that was sort of in primary, and it wasn't such a major thing. But once I hit intermediate and high school, people were sort of like, what do you want? Like, nobody knew what I was listening to. And I remember having days where it was like, oh, today's the anniversary of John Lennon's death, and I'd spend the afternoon in silence, like in remembrance, and people are like, oh, come on, get it, grow up. But I think the hardest part was probably actually church. I got a lot of flack, like even from friends at church. Oh, it's not Christian music, and I was like, well, better than what some of you guys are listening to. It's a lot a lot more wholesome than that. And I think my dad's concern was in their latter years with more so like the psychedelic music. I think he was concerned that I was going to develop an obsession, which, okay, maybe I did. But I think his concern was that I'd end up sort of in a similar lifestyle of drugs, and which I didn't, thank goodness. But yeah, it was as a Christian, not so much as a kid. I think as a Christian, I got a lot of flack.
What is it
It
about
does.
that band, do you think, even beyond the music? There's something about those four individuals, their story. What captivated you beyond the music?
I don't know. I love watching their movies, like Help on a Hard Day's Night. I got a couple of them on DVD, and their humour. I find I quite like British stuff more so than American. Like even movies, like I love murder mysteries, but I like the British ones, and I like old school British music. Like I like the American stuff, but I tend to gravitate more towards the British stuff, and I'm not sure why, but it's just I think they were just sort of a fun group. I think that's kind of what attracts people is just the fun and the spontaneous, and it just kind of it makes you feel good. It's a feel good sort of vibe.
No doubt about it. What about jumping in time? If we go into late 2023 and the word is announced that the Paul McCartney Got Back tour is coming to the Australia New Zealand region, how did you first hear about that? And was there a sense, I imagine, of real disappointment that New Zealand wasn't on the schedule?
I kind of don't even remember really hearing about it. I think I vaguely heard something on one of the radio stations, and I didn't even know where he was going to be. And then I realized, oh, he's not coming to New Zealand. And back in 2017, he did come to New Zealand. He did come to Auckland. And at that stage, I was living in Auckland. And the fella I was with at the time, he wasn't really his cup of tea for music, but he did enjoy the Beatles once he got to know me. And so we got tickets to go. And then on the day, I actually won other tickets. And then in 2023, when I heard he wasn't coming to New Zealand, I sort of thought, oh, well, maybe I'll enter the competition on the radio. And maybe if I win tickets, then I'll look at going. Because my boss at the time had said, you've got a couple of weeks holiday and we need you to take them. Can you take them before November, which was around the time Paul was coming to Aussie. So I thought, oh, maybe if I win tickets, maybe then. And for some reason, I was at my auntie's place and I was living in the South Island at the time. And I thought, oh, I wonder what the tickets are worth, So I thought, oh, I'll just be curious and have a look where he's playing and what the tickets are worth. And I didn't even look at the general tickets like I did years beforehand. I just went straight to the VIP section. And I was like, no, I'm doing this. I haven't had a proper holiday in years. I'm going to do this. And so I looked, and they had Gold Coast or Brisbane was sort of my cheaper options. And I looked, but the Gold Coast VIP was pretty much sold out. And so I thought, oh, I'll go with Brisbane then. And I hadn't even asked my boss for the time off. She had said to take it, but I was sort of like, well, unless I go to Aussie, I'm going to miss out. And realistically speaking, is he going to come back down these ways anyway? So it was you do it or you don't, miss out and regret it, or yeah.
Can you tell us what happened when you've gone and you've bought that ticket, you bought VIP? When you made the decision that you were going, you purchased the ticket, you had to leave that job, am I right? Can you just share a little bit of that decision making?
Okay. So when I was booking the tickets, I couldn't choose my seat, but I knew I was not the top VIP, but I knew it was going to give me a seat in the front section. And I was trying to book it while I was driving home, and I lived about 45 minutes away, and it wasn't accepting my Visa debit card, and I was having a panic attack. And I pulled over at the gas station, and I'm ringing my brother, and I was like, you need to book my tickets for me. It's not working. So he went on and booked it. So I was like, well, I never treat myself. $2,000, I have it sitting there. What else am I going to do with it realistically? Find more things to make my bedroom look like a Beatles memorabilia room. I don't know. I'd rather go to the concert. So he did that straight away for me. And I didn't know where my seat was at that stage. I didn't know what the stadium was like. So I sort of got home And I thought, right, I'm going to have to tell my boss tomorrow that I want this particular time off. So I approached her the next morning and I said to her, oh, I know what dates I want off now. And she said, yep, what's that? And I said, oh, that week, the last bit of October, start of November. Straight away, she was like, nah. And I was like, sorry. She's like, nah, you can't have it off then. And in my head, to be fair, things had already sort of gone downhill at the stables I was working at, and I kind of knew it was sort of, she had no grounds to fire me on, but she kind of gave me that feeling she didn't want me there. So it was a little bit of a stressful time, but I thought, well, either I miss out on Paul McCartney or I continue in a crap job anyway.
Yeah.
So it was sort of like no-brainer. And I did. I got back on after the weekend and I said, oh, hopefully catch up with you today. And she said, oh, I'm a bit busy today. So I just left my letter of resignation on her coffee table. And a few hours later, I heard from her. She's, nah, today doesn't work for me. And I finished off my last 2 weeks. Nobody said anything. Nobody asked me why I was quitting.
Wow.
Nothing.
You make that big decision, and Wednesday, November 1, you're in Brisbane. You've never been to Suncorp Stadium before. You have a sign made. Can you just tell us what was the motivation for the sign? You're going to show me the sign. There it is. And it says, quit my job to be here. So you make that sign, you're on your own, you arrive to Suncorp Stadium, it's perfect weather. And again, I can still remember as I'm standing in that center section, looking over to my left, you walking toward me, because you'd be seated next to me and you've got that sign and this excitement on your face. And straight away, I thought, as I mentioned earlier, terrific, someone that's really going to care. This is going to be great. What were your hopes with the sign? You obviously had an expectation.
The funniest thing is that weekend that I spent in Wellington, I was going to a Salvation Army church in Christchurch at the time, and I'd gone up there for a chaplaincy workshop. And when I'd arrived, I was one of the first people to arrive, and another lady from Auckland and a Fijian fella from Cambridge were like, well, let's go out for dinner while we're waiting. So we went to Burger King. And I was telling them about how I was, going to quit my job and go to this concert. And this lady and I just, chatting away, just being stupid. And the poor Ben, the boy, was just like, what are you two going on about? And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to make this sign that says, quit my job to be here. And we were joking about how, oh, he's going to read it from on stage and he's going to talk to you and you guys are going to be best friends and he's going to take you away on his private jet. And, we were just being stupid, kind of not expecting anything, but just making up some ridiculous scenario in our head. And so the day of the concert, I'd gone to Australia. My best friend went with me, not to the concert. We'd actually been best friends since high school. And the funniest part was when she came to our school, I literally walked up to her and I was like, hey, I'm Bridge and I like the Beatles. That's exactly how I introduced myself to her. So it was awesome that she came to Aussie with me. And I sort of said to her, we talked about doing the sign. And then the day of the concert, I was like, oh, nah, I'm not going to make the sign. I'm just going to go and enjoy myself. And she was like, no, you have to make the sign.
Right.
I was like, okay. So we went down the road and we bought A3 sheets of paper and some felt tips. And to me, this is another God moment. The first God moment was my brother having to buy the ticket because he got me the best seat I could have got, whereas my one was off the side somewhere. My second God moment was, what Kiwi girl takes double-sided sellotape to Brisbane for a few days holiday? No one, but my best friend had double-sided sellotape packed in her luggage. So we were able to make this massive sign that Paul McCartney in his 80s was able to read from on stage, or else I would have just made a tiny weeny one and he wouldn't have been able to see it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it just, she made me do it. And I did. I whipped it up like 10 minutes. I was busy getting ready, trying to get to the sound check and everything at 2 o'clock or whatever time it was. And I'm sitting on the floor there just drawing out the sign, trying to do my hair and makeup at the same time.
Fantastic. We're standing there. We obviously went along to the sound check, which was incredible. That hour is an hour that I'll never forget. That was just amazing. And then you get another 3 hours just a little while later when he starts. I mean, it was incredible. Can you describe the moment he saw the sign and called you out, what that was for you? I know there's footage of it. We might share some of the audio if I can make that available in the podcast on the intro or the outro. But someone was luckily filming from behind and caught that moment happening. As you're waving the sign about, and he'd asked the lights to come up, if I remember right, so he could talk to and look at the audience. And that was when you kicked in with all that energy. Rather than me talk it through, take us through what that moment was like for you when you knew, oh my God, he's calling me out.
I was a bit the same as you. I was quite excited when I saw where my seat was, because I thought, oh, he might actually be able to see my sign. I didn't realize I was going to be third row from the front and right in the middle. And I even videoed myself walking up there saying, oh my gosh, I'm just getting closer and closer. Like, I was amazed, and I thought, oh, maybe this could happen, thinking this is ridiculous scenario, could be a possibility. And I had sat down, and the lady in front of me worked for a KISS radio station. And so she read my sign and she asked if she could interview me. And so she did, which was a little bit mind boggling. I thought, oh, that's hilarious, but that's cool. That's made my night. And yeah, there is footage of it. One of the gentlemen I had dinner with that night at the concert, he videoed it, but he'd missed the first part. But a couple of weeks ago, another fella that I had run into at the motel I was staying, who recognized me from the big screens, he found me on Facebook, and he actually sent me, somebody has videoed the entire concert. And so I was able to fast forward right to where Paul McCartney is talking about, I go to these, we do these concerts and people bring their signs. And when he started talking about people bringing their signs, I kind of got to the point where my arms were tired and I'd put my sign down, and I literally had thought to myself, I've waved my sign enough. I'm just going to put it down and enjoy the concert. And the minute he said, people bring these signs, everyone around me was like, get your sign up. I was like, okay. So I got my sign up and was waving it around like everybody else was. And all of a sudden he just stops, and like, you'll hear it in the audio, but he just stops. He's like, oh, quit my job to be here. And I just froze. I was like, oh, that's my sign. And my whole body just went I felt like I went bright red. And my reaction was just to leap up on the seat, waving the sign around, and do a massive circle with everybody cheering and whistling and yelling. And I was like, that's so weird. He read my sign. And then he continued to talk to me. And I was just like, this doesn't happen to people like me. What the heck is going on?
So you've locked eyes with one of the Fab Four, and he's asking you about his sign or your sign. And then, if I remember right, he asked you the question, will they give you your job back? He asked a question like that. So he spent a bit of time with you, didn't he?
Yes, he read my sign and everyone was cheering, and I yelled out, and I'm so glad I did, because I don't regret quitting my job. Like, even if he hadn't spoken to me, even if I hadn't ended up on the news, I was glad I quit my job. Like, that took guts, and you can find another job easily, but you can't find another Paul McCartney concert like that. So I yelled out, I'm so glad I did. And he's like, oh, are they going to have you back? And I was like, no. And then he's like, well, did you quit? And I was like, no, I quit. And because I didn't know at that stage, but my boss had actually blocked me on Facebook. So she was not having me back. And I didn't want to go back anyway.
That's funny. I remember you turning to me after he finished that moment with you, and you had tears in your eyes and saying, I just can't believe that happened. And I was excited for it. I can't believe that happened either. That's incredible. And I think I said to you, and you had 46,000 people watch the moment and cheering for you as he's speaking to you. It's almost like life had brought you to this intersection where this moment is going to happen, and you're going to remember it for the rest of your life. Even if it's just seconds, it's effectively a little exchange with Paul McCartney.
I think one thing that was amazing was I had moved 3 years prior. I had moved from Auckland, which is in the North Island of New Zealand, to Christchurch, which is in the South Island. And my mum has a sister there, and I've got a couple of cousins there, which I'm quite close with. And for me, it was really hard moving away from my family. Like, I've got a brother who's got, kids, and it was really hard for me to move away from all of that. But I did it so that I could do my jockey apprenticeship, because I wanted that career. And the whole 3 years that I'd been in Christchurch, nothing worked out. The boy that I was with, we broke up. I didn't get vaccinated, so I lost my job. I couldn't buy a house, which is what I wanted to do. And it was a really rough 3 years. And one of the most amazing things, I don't think my dad knows this, but my cousin was messaging him, and they were joking about her dad, keeping bad company. And my cousin Min said to my dad, oh, well, what about your daughter? And she was joking around, and he came back and he said, out of a crowd of 40,000 people, Bridget got this special treatment and it has just renewed her joy. And it did. Like, it had literally, like, my auntie down south and so many people used to say to me, Bridget, something good has to happen to you soon. I don't know what it is. Like, the fella that I had been with, we'd broken up 2 years prior. And when I told him, he said, there, I knew something good had to come. And that was it. And I was like, I would go through those 3 years again just for that moment.
You just said a beautiful line there, that moment renewed my joy. And I think the story of the Beatles is a story about joy back into the world for people on a mass scale. And then it's not often that you get it on an intimate scale in a mass setting, which is what you had. Do you play that memory back in your mind occasionally?
Every time like things started to go bad again, you just play that video clip that Andrew had taken, and it just makes you laugh. You're like, did that really happen? Did that really happen to me? Some kid who was obsessed and made like research folders, like what you do for school projects. I used to do that in my spare time on the Beatles, and just, did that actually happen to me? It's just unbelievable. You look at, photos and albums and stuff of the Beatles when they're younger. I was like, that is the same man that talked to me in front of all those people and changed my life. It's incredible.
That's magnificent. I'm looking across to my left at a towel that we talked about in one of our recent episodes, and it's a small hand towel that Ringo Starr threw out from the audience to me in the second row in 2013 when I saw Ringo live. It's only a moment. There's footage of it. It's a heartbeat, but there's a little bit of contact on the eyes, a head nod, and then he threw this bit of towel. It's sitting under glass. It's that little bit of joy, that little bit of connection. And for just a moment in the bigness of their lives, you've got eye contact and you're having a moment. That's what's incredible. Your story is amazing. I
didn't wash the towel.
What's that?
I hope you didn't wash the towel.
It's never been washed. It sits under glass now. Now, we are running a little bit short on time. Thank you again for sitting down and sharing your story. It's so singular. It's so special. There's obviously, with the music, it can influence you on any given day as to what album you would hold as a favorite or what tune you feel like you're in a mood for. What album do you go back to as a Beatles album? I ask this of all of our guests. It may not necessarily be their best.
I think when I got interviewed after the concert to be on the news, after we'd done the interview, they asked me the same question: what's your favorite Beatles song or your favorite album? And for me, I tend to listen to it all on Spotify now. I used to just record songs off the radio on my tape deck, and I have a few CDs. And now I have my own record player, I do have a few records, but I don't go back to an album as such. I find, like you said, depending on your moods or your stage in life, I have favorite songs. Like I have my go-to songs for karaoke, like Beatles ones, like Let It Be or something. That's always a favorite for karaoke. But I do, when I'm going through different phases in life, I have particular favorite songs. Like some strange phase I go through and I love Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Or, even recently, my one at the moment is In My Life. Like, that's my top one at the moment. Or, I really enjoy that new one now and then. So I go through phases where I want the more quirky songs, or I like the older stuff. I think it just depends on what's going on in your life and what stage you're at, and it depends on your mood. And it could be your favorite one day, and then the next you just completely change to Hey Bulldog, or I don't have a favorite album as such, and I don't have a favorite song. I do have some top songs, but it changes all the time.
Yeah, there's a song for every mood, isn't there, with them? That's what, again, part of their magic. Your story is one of my favorite Beatles stories, and I was really happy to stand next to you while it was happening and see the impact that it had on you and sharing the joy that you were having. So it was an amazing night, one that'll live forever in my memory. It was incredible.
I think you can actually hear on the video clip that Andrew took, because he was only a couple of rows behind, I think you can actually hear when I jump back down off my chair and talk to you, you can actually hear you say, what a moment. And you're just like, what a moment.
Yeah, and it really was. Thank you for tuning in from across the seas out of New Zealand and sharing it with fellow fans who I know are going to appreciate your passion that still continues on to this day. Wishing you all the best.
I said to Mum, I was like, right, I'm going for this interview. I'm going to get famous again.
Well, I don't know about fame, but certainly there'll be appreciation from fellow fans. So, Bridge, thank you again for being part of the You Can Talk to Me podcast and sharing your incredible story.
Anytime.
My job to be here. Are you going to have me back? Anyway, you're still happy here.
We hope you enjoyed the show. You know the name, look up the socials. You'll find us on Facebook and Instagram where we can all come together. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe and spread the word. It all helps raise the profile of the You Can Talk to Me podcast. Thanks for listening.